Good evening, everybody. I'm Zach Blanchard. We're interrupting your regularly scheduled program for special coverage of the Maine primary. The results are in. President Joe Biden is the projected winner of the Democratic primary tonight against long-shot challenger Dean Phillips. Here's those results. On the Republican side, former President Donald Trump is the projected winner. Now we're going to go to the Republican side, where former President Donald Trump is the winner with 69% of the vote to Haley's 30%, with DeSantis and Ramaswamy both with 1%. Now, our reporters have been all across the state throughout the day. Huge voter turnout is expected for the general election in November, but it sure has been a different story for today's primary elections. News Center 8's Alex Haskell has been at some of the polling spots across Portland tonight. Alex, how do things look there?
Hey, Zach. Yeah, I've been emailing back and forth with Portland City Clerk Ashley Rand. She tells me things were mostly slow across the 11 locations in Portland, including the one I'm outside of right now, Merrill Auditorium. It's typically a busy location because it's right here in downtown, but people were trickling in while we checked it out earlier in the day. We were also at East End Community School, a little busier there. Now, one reason for this low turnout is some registered voters just aren't excited by the options they have for presidential candidates and weren't motivated to come out. Despite feeling this way, I did find two voters who still wanted to do their civic duty.
I think I'm feeling similarly about not being super happy about what options I have this election.
Yeah, would like to have more.
Yeah.
Limited palette.
Yeah,
this year.
certainly. But you know, I feel it's still important to come out and try to make your voice heard in any way.
I also reached out to South Portland City Clerk. She told me things were slow there as well. Zach?
Alex Haskell live in Portland tonight. Thanks so much. Now we want to go over to Donovan Lynch, who has been with voters in Bangor throughout the day today, talking about how this race could impact the CD2 congressional race. Donovan?
Yeah, Zach, certainly there's a lot of significance with Trump winning in Maine. In the 2nd Congressional District, which is traditionally very conservative, very rural, Trump in the general election won in 2016, won in 2020. And now Jared Golden on the congressional level is trying to keep his seat as a Democrat representing this very Republican part of the state. And he's facing challengers Austin Terrio and Michael Sobolewski, both of whom are Trump allies. So the question remains, going forward, can Jared Golden hold on to this coalition built on moderate voters, built on, in many cases, Republican voters, in the face of this resounding victory, it seems at this point, from former President Donald Trump? Back to you, Zach.
All right, Donovan Lynch live in our Bangor studios tonight. Thank you. I want to bring in our political analysts, Republican Garrett Mason and Democrat Betsy Sweet. Thanks for sticking with us.
Thanks for having us.
First things first, probably nothing too surprising tonight. How, Betsy?
No, nothing too surprising. I mean, I think we knew what was going to happen. And again, I think these primaries were decided early on, and I think sadly they were decided by the parties, not by the people. And I think that's a bad trend in democracy. But I think the fact that they really only had two choices, and they're the winners. So,
Garrett?
Yeah, I mean, when you compare 2020 primary to 2024 primary, you see there was a big Democrat primary. The vaccine referendum was on the ballot that year. The turnout was very high, and then you look at this one, and it looks pretty anemic so far. So I think Betsy's right. I think it was a low turnout election because there wasn't a lot of choice.
I also think that, you know, Maine moving to a primary, a ballot primary from our caucus system.
Yeah.
You know, I think there was a lot of, for a lot of people anyway, the caucuses were very exciting. You got to go see your neighbors and your friends, and you got to jostle around and separate into your corners. And going into the voting booth, especially when there's not much choice on the ballot, is a different thing.
Yeah, right now looking at the results, it's looking like former President Donald Trump has 70% of the vote. Specifically in Maine's 2nd District, you heard Donovan kind of talking about how this will play out come June and then ultimately come November for Jared Golden's seat. Garrett, do you think that the support for Donald Trump in that district will impact how Jared Golden does?
I think so. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how if it does end up being like a 60-40 race or a 70-30 race between Trump and Haley, how those what the numbers look like in June between Mike Sobolewski and Austin Terrio. Like, do those voters go to a certain camp or not? I think I think that'll be an interesting, puzzle that will play out in June. But, in regards to the CD2 race, I mean, I think if there was ever a race that Jared Golden was vulnerable in, it's this one. There is a coalition of Republicans that support Jared Golden, and largely because of his stance on gun rights and where he traditionally had stuck on a more conservative side of that. And as noted, he has switched on that. I think that is going to hurt him a little bit, but he's really tread the line. He's chair of the Blue Dog Coalition in Congress, which I think helps him a lot. And you saw 2 Republican voters who they like his military service. So he's built a base. Is that base going to stick with him despite some of his change in policy? I guess we're going to see.
Well, and I think so. And I think we have to remember that change in policy on political people is a big deal. But 70% of Mainers, including Republicans, including people in the 2nd District, support an assault weapons ban. So I think it's going to be very, very important to pay attention to how that plays out, because I don't think it's going to play out in the elections the way everyone has always feared it has. And I think his military service, his work, for the constituents of the 2nd District is really what's going to happen. And I'm pretty sure he's going to hold on to that coalition.
Is it shocking that Nikki Haley didn't do better even with the support of Senator Collins last minute?
It was last minute support. I think it's that she missed a real opportunity, because her base, Nikki Haley's base, was college-educated Republicans, and she had a chance to appeal to moderate, college-educated and independents, because they could vote in this primary. And the fact that she didn't put any resources into that, didn't spend any time on that to get people excited about doing that, was a real miss, because I think she could have gotten, if she was at 30% now, she could have gotten close to 50. And so, and that could have maybe kept her alive one more day.
Yeah, probably. I think what you're going to see, like when all this shakes out, is that independents got to go in and choose ballot, right? So I mean, I think you're going to see a lot of independents grab the Republican ballot this time around. Yeah. I think Nikki Haley appealed to a lot of those independents that maybe wanted to see something different. They didn't like either of their choices, and Nikki Haley seemed to represent something different.
And something younger.
But ultimately, nationwide, it is looking like we're going to have a Trump-Biden rematch again, something we've heard from Maine voters they don't want. And if they weren't motivated to go to the polls for the primary to perhaps change that, what's going to get them to the polls come June and November, Betsy?
I think that's the biggest question that we have. I mean, I think that the 2 candidates that we have will lead to a lower voter turnout. I think it is going to be the strength of the issues and the strength of our local candidates and our local races and statewide races that will drive people to the polls. And I think as we said, there are some very serious issues, including the right to choose, which is huge in Maine, that'll drive people to the polls. And maybe instead of the presidential candidates providing the tail, it might be vice versa.
And I think you're going to find that. I think your local state legislator, your local state senator, people know them, and they always tend to get a higher vote total than the national candidates anyways. So I think we're going to see a great crop of legislative candidates on both sides that folks can choose from, and I think that's what people can get excited about if they're not excited about the presidential campaign. So there's lots to be excited about in democracy. So
I love the optimism, yeah. Garrett
we have to save democracy this time around. So yeah.
Garrett Mason, Betsy Sweet, thanks so much for being with us. Now remember, you can text the word results to 207-828-6622 to get those latest results as they come in on the News Center Maine website. We'll be back with more Voice of the Voter coverage and analysis tonight on News Center Maine at 11. For now, we'll return you to NBC programming.